And did you hear who you're talking about, George, Mr. Floyd? Did you hear Mr. Floyd saying anything?
Yes, I heard him say he couldn't breathe and that his stomach hurt and that he wanted his mom.
Did you have your friend Kaylin's phone with you when you got out of the car?
Yes, I did.
So when you heard all these things going on, what did you decide to do with that phone?
I knew initially that there was something wrong, so I started recording.
So you said you knew something was wrong. What made you think something was wrong?
Well, a lot of people looked in distress on the sidewalk, and George was in distress.
And when you say he was in distress, was it those things you heard him saying that made you think he was in distress?
Yes.
Okay, so was that what prompted you to start to record?
Yes.
And could you see what was going on with Mr. Floyd at that point?
Yes, I could see that he was being held to the ground.
And what did you see with respect to how he was being held to the ground?
I saw that Derek had his knee on his neck and two other officers had his body pinned down.
So when you say Derek, are you referring to Derek Chauvin?
Yes.
So you saw Mr. Chauvin with a knee on Mr. Floyd's neck, is that right?
Yes.
And then you said there were other officers. What were those officers doing that you could see?
They were like holding him down, his lower half of his body.
And in terms of George Floyd's condition, how did he look to you when you saw him?
He looked like he was struggling at first, and he looked distressed, and he looked like he was fighting to breathe.
So when you say struggling and fighting to breathe and in distress, did it look like he was getting into a physical fight with the officers, or did it look like he was struggling in terms of his ability to breathe?
He was struggling with his ability to breathe. He was focused on trying to breathe.
Okay. And how could you tell that from your perspective where you were?
Well, at first he was vocal and he got less vocal, and you could tell he was talking with like smaller and smaller breaths, and he'd spit a little when he'd talk, and he'd try and move his head because he was uncomfortable.
And you said he was getting less and less vocal. Was there, did you become more concerned over time?
Yes.
And why was that you became more concerned or worried?
Because I slowly knew that if he were to be held down much longer, he wouldn't live.
And what made you think that?
Because you could see in his face that he was slowly not being able to breathe. His eyes were rolling back, and at one point he just kind of sat there.
And when you say
laid there.
Sorry, when you say he just kind of sat there or laid there, did you notice a change in his ability to speak or make sounds?
Yes.
And take your time. If you need a tissue, there's some right there. Is this difficult for you to talk about?
Yeah.
Do you need a minute?